When people remember Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel monsters, they usually remember the creatures. Blue Eyes White Dragon gave Kaiba his power. Dark Magician represented the Pharaoh. Red Eyes became proof of Joey's growth. Exodia ended the first duel before most viewers fully understood what a duel was. The Egyptian gods arrived with enough ceremony to make ordinary monsters feel like employees watching the owners enter the building. The monsters became the faces of the series. The spell cards decided what those faces were allowed to do. A dragon could have 3,000 attack and still spend the duel trapped behind swords of revealing light. A monster destroyed with great effort could return through Monster Reborn. A field that looked unbeatable could disappear under Raigeki. Polymerization could turn two familiar monsters into something the audience had never seen. Change of Heart could take a creature that represented one duelist and place it under the control of another. Pot of Greed could quietly give a character the exact 2 cards required to keep a 5-part episode moving. Spell cards were the verbs of duel monsters. Monsters entered, attacked, and defended. Spells changed ownership, rewrote time, created new creatures, revived old ones, and occasionally informed a duelist that the usual rules had been suspended until further notice. That makes important a more useful word than strongest. Plenty of absurd cards appeared in the anime. Some existed for one duel and vanished. The most important spells lasted because they shaped how people understood Yu-Gi-Oh! They introduced major mechanics, defined characters, created famous scenes, or exposed ideas that later became central to the real card game. Pot of Greed is the simplest place to begin. Its effect contains 4 words. Draw 2 cards. That simplicity made it easy for the anime to use and dangerous for the physical game to allow. A player activates 1 card, sends it away, and receives 2 cards in return. The hand ends with 1 more card than it had before the activation. No life points are paid, no monster is tributed, no condition has to be met. The pot smiles, the player draws 2 cards, and basic arithmetic quietly leaves the room. In the anime, Pot of Greed solved a storytelling problem. Long duels require options. Once a character has summoned monsters, set defenses, and answered several attacks, the hand begins to empty. Pot of Greed refills the possibilities without demanding an entire side plot. The next 2 cards can produce a new strategy, reveal a signature monster, or extend the duel into another episode. The card also taught viewers one of Yu-Gi-Oh's most important lessons before many of them knew the phrase card advantage. Cards are resources. Life points matter because losing all of them ends the duel. Cards matter because they determine whether the player can prevent that ending. Drawing 2 from 1 activation gives the duelist more answers, more combinations, and another chance to find the card the story has been waiting for. Real players understood the value immediately. Almost every deck wanted Pot of Greed because almost every deck wanted access to more of itself. A card that fits everywhere creates a strange kind of dominance. It does not force one strategy on the game. It appears inside every strategy and makes each one more consistent. That universal value eventually made Pot of Greed forbidden in the standard competitive game. The card never needed a complicated exploit. It was already the exploit. Graceful Charity looked more balanced because it asked the player to discard. The duelist draws 3 cards and discards 2. If we count only the number of cards in the hand, Graceful Charity does not create the same immediate profit as Pot of Greed. It replaces itself while allowing the player to see 3 new options. That alone would make it excellent. Yu-Gi-Oh! Gave it another advantage by making the graveyard increasingly useful. A discarded monster could later return through Monster Reborn. Certain monsters wanted to reach the graveyard because their effects activated there. Unneeded cards could be removed from the hand while the useful cards stayed. Graceful Charity allowed a player to improve the present hand and prepare the future graveyard in one smooth action. The anime often treated discarding as a visible sacrifice. A character had to choose which cards to abandon. That created a small moment of judgment inside a larger turn. Competitive players approached the choice with considerably less sadness. Once the graveyard became a second collection of resources, discard 2 could become an instruction to place 2 cards exactly where the deck wanted them. Graceful Charity therefore represents a stage in Yu-Gi-Oh's development. Early viewers could read the graveyard as the place where destroyed and discarded cards went. Better duelists learned to see it as storage. Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Has pushed that idea so far that sending the correct card to the graveyard can feel suspiciously close to drawing it. Pot of Greed gave the player more cards. Graceful Charity gave the player better access to the right cards and better control over where the others went. Both became forbidden because they improved almost every hand too easily. Monster Reborn turned the graveyard into part of the field. Its physical effect allows the player to target a monster in either graveyard and special summon it. That one sentence changed the meaning of destruction. Defeating a powerful monster no longer guaranteed that the threat had passed. The fallen creature remained available to both players. Duel monsters understood the emotional power of this better than almost any other card. Signature monsters were treated as partners. When Dark Magician or Blue Eyes returned, the moment carried the feeling of a hero re-entering the battle. A villain could use the same card and make Resurrection feel invasive. The opponent's monster could be taken from the graveyard and forced to fight for the person who had helped destroy it. Battle City made Monster Reborn especially important through the Winged Dragon of Ra. Merrick repeatedly used the graveyard as a resting place for Ra. Destroying the Egyptian god solved the problem for a few minutes. Monster Reborn could begin the ceremony again, and Ra's anime abilities made every return feel larger than a normal special summon. The card also erased the cost of difficult monsters. A duelist might spend tributes, fusion materials, or several turns summoning one creature. Monster Reborn waited until that work had been completed once and brought the monster back with a single activation. It could even choose the opponent's best monster, meaning the card became stronger whenever the other deck produced something more valuable. Its greatest use arrives at the end of the entire series. During the ceremonial duel, Adam attempts to use Monster Reborn to revive Sleeper the Sky Dragon. Yugi has already placed a card inside Gold Sarcophagus. The hidden card is his own Monster Reborn. Under the anime's effect, revealing the same card prevents Adam's copy from resolving. Yugi stops the dead from returning. For years, Monster Reborn had been one of the series' most dependable comeback cards. It kept old monsters, old strategies, and old relationships available. The final duel uses that familiar promise against the Pharaoh. Adam belongs to the past, and Yugi can only complete his journey by allowing the past to remain at rest. The last decisive counter is not a larger monster. It is Yugi proving that he understands when resurrection has to end. That moment makes Gold Sarcophagus one of the most important spell cards in the anime, even though its role is brief. The physical version banishes a card from the deck and adds it to the hand after 2 standby phases. The ceremonial duel gives it a more personal purpose. Yugi places one card inside, keeps it hidden, and trusts that he understands Adam well enough to predict what he will eventually play. The sarcophagus carries the card that defeats the Pharaoh's final attempt to revive a god. It behaves like a sealed message from Yugi to the person who has shared his body and thoughts for the entire series. When the card is revealed, their connection produces the answer, and their separation gives the answer meaning. Monster Reborn controls the series' relationship with memory. Gold Sarcophagus closes it. Polymerization is important for a different reason. It gave Yu-Gi-Oh! One of its first great forms of escalation. The card combines fusion materials from the hand or field to summon a fusion monster from the extra deck. In the original series, that usually meant 2 known creatures disappeared and returned as one stronger, stranger creature. Kaiba's 3 Blue Eyes could become Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. Yugi could combine Dark Magician and Buster Blader into Dark Paladin. Pegasus could transform Relinquished into Thousand Eyes Restrict. The mechanic allowed a duel to reveal another level after the strongest normal monsters had already appeared. Fusion also gave the anime a visual way to express relationships. 2 monsters carried separate histories, designs, and abilities. Polymerization forced them into one identity. Sometimes the result reflected cooperation. Sometimes it looked unnatural, especially when villains fused creatures into something disturbing. The same mechanic could create unity or violation depending on who controlled it. The famous duel between Yugi and Kaiba at Duelist Kingdom shows how flexible the anime's idea of fusion could become. Kaiba creates Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, a monster designed to look like the end of the duel. Yugi uses polymerization with Living Arrow to fuse Mammoth Graveyard into it. The decaying monster infects the dragon and lowers its strength over time. The move belongs to an era when duel monsters treated card text as the beginning of a negotiation. The exact interaction would make a tournament judge age several years, although it communicates something essential about Yugi. Kaiba sees fusion as multiplication of power. Yugi sees it as a relationship that can be poisoned. Polymerization survived far beyond the original series because fusion became one of Yu-Gi-Oh's permanent summoning systems. Later cards made the process faster, cheaper, and specific to entire archetypes. The ordinary green spell remained the image associated with combining monsters. It was a piece of game machinery that the anime taught viewers to recognize instantly. Ritual spells introduced another kind of summoning. Blackluster Ritual allowed Yugi to summon Blackluster Soldier. Black Illusion Ritual allowed Pegasus to summon Relinquished. These cards required a specific ritual monster and tributes whose levels met the required amount. The process felt formal. A powerful creature did not simply arrive. The player performed an act that called it into the duel. That ceremony fit Yu-Gi-Oh's Egyptian atmosphere. The game was connected to ancient magic souls and memories long before its rules became stable. Ritual summoning made the cards behave like artifacts from that older world. The duelist gave up creatures, activated the correct rite, and received something that seemed to exist outside the normal hierarchy. Ritual monsters struggled in much of early competitive play because the summon demanded several specific pieces. The player needed the ritual monster, the ritual spell, and enough tribute material. Drawing the pieces in the wrong order created dead cards. Fusion carried similar costs, although the extra deck kept the fusion monster outside the hand. Rituals asked the main deck to cooperate with a ceremony every time. Their competitive inconsistency does not reduce their importance to duel monsters. Blackluster Soldier gave Yugi one of his most memorable early transformations. Relinquish gave Pegasus a monster that expressed his entire style. It absorbed an opposing creature, used that creature as protection, and turned the enemy's strength into Pegasus' property. The ritual spell told the audience that some monsters required more than strength. They required access. Toon World turned access into personal privilege. Pegasus activates the continuous spell and changes the duel around himself. His monsters become cartoon versions of familiar creatures. Toon Mermaid, Manga Ryu Ran, Toon Summoned Skull, and Blue Eyes Toon Dragon belong to a world that Pegasus created and controls. The genius of Toon World comes from how closely it matches its owner. Pegasus invented duel monsters. He knows secrets about the cards that his opponents do not know. He reads minds through the Millennium Eye, which already makes a fair game nearly impossible. Toon World adds another private layer. His creatures follow rules that seem written for his amusement. Kaiba attacks them and watches the Toons avoid damage through cartoon logic. They stretch, bend, and disappear into the book. Pegasus spends the duel laughing because his opponent is approaching the game like a machine, while Pegasus has placed that machine inside an episode of Slapstick. The physical Toon World became far simpler than the version presented in Duelist Kingdom. Early printed Toon monsters carried awkward costs and dependencies, and destroying Toon World could collapse the strategy around it. The anime could grant the card whatever protection and personality the scene needed. Real players had to read actual text, which was an unfortunate development for anyone hoping to dodge attacks by turning into a puddle. Toon World still changed the series. It proved that a spell card could define an entire deck's visual identity. Later archetypes would depend on field spells, continuous spells, and dedicated support that made their monsters function as a connected system. Pegasus reaches that idea early. One book enters the field, and every monster around it begins obeying a new reality. The Seal of Orichalcos takes the same concept and removes the comedy. The seal is the central card of the Waking the Dragons arc. Once activated, it surrounds the duelists with a glowing circle, empowers the user's monsters, and places the loser's soul in danger. Its anime abilities expand across the arc, allowing unusual formations and turning every duel into part of Darts' larger plan. The seal matters because it changes what activating a spell card says about the person using it. Most powerful cards create temptation through victory. The seal creates temptation through surrender. A duelist gains strength by accepting the darkness the card encourages. Mai uses it while consumed by humiliation and resentment. Raphael treats it as proof that sacrificing monsters is necessary. Adam activates it during his rematch with Raphael because he becomes obsessed with winning and begins treating his own monsters as expendable pieces. That decision gives the series one of its few moments where Adam's confidence becomes a genuine moral failure. He keeps pushing for victory, sacrifices his monsters, and loses Yugi's soul as the consequence. The card does more than increase attack points. It gives Adam permission to become the worst version of the king he could be. Its physical printing had to be reduced drastically. A real card cannot collect souls, and tournament venues tend to appreciate this restriction. The printed seal raises the attack of the controller's monsters and includes protection, while the sprawling anime powers are narrowed into something a rulebook can survive. As a story card, the Seal of Orichalcos may be the most important spell that belongs primarily to one arc. Monster Reborn appears across the series. Polymerization supports the structure of the game. The seal dominates a season's imagery, stakes, and psychology. The green circle became more recognizable than most of the monsters darts actually summoned. Swords of Revealing Light created drama with a much smaller effect. The card reveals the opponent's face-down monsters and prevents the opponent from attacking for 3 turns. It gives the player time. Time is one of the least visible resources in a duel. A player with a weak field may still survive if they can reach the next draw. 3 protected turns can provide 3 new cards, 3 normal summons, and several chances to assemble a response. Swords of Revealing Light turns survival itself into a strategy. The anime uses the card as a visible countdown. The swords hang over the field while both players know the protection will expire. Yugi often gains room to search for an answer, and the opponent gains time to build something worse. The card pauses the battle without pausing the pressure. That makes it valuable to television. An immediate board wipe ends a threat. Swords keeps the threat in front of the audience. The dangerous monsters remain visible, the player remains cornered, and every passing turn brings the attack closer. It also helped define Yugi's style. Kaiba frequently pushed toward a larger monster. Joey survived through risk, instinct, and improvised combinations. Yugi used delay to gather information and find a route through the board. Swords of Revealing Light created space for thought, which was often more valuable to him than a temporary increase in attack. Change of Heart attacked the relationship between a duelist and their monsters. The player takes control of one opposing monster until the end phase. A single spell removes a defender, creates an attacker, and may provide tribute material. The temporary limit offers little comfort when the stolen monster can attack its owner and disappear before it has to return. Yami Bakura calls Change of Heart his favorite card early in the series. The artwork presents a figure divided between a gentle side and a cruel side. That choice fits a character whose body is shared by Yu Bakura and the dark spirit of the Millennium Ring. The card explains Bakura before the story fully explains him. Control changes hands while the original identity remains trapped inside. The face is familiar, the loyalty has been overwritten, and the opponent has to fight something that once belonged beside them. Bakura spends much of Duel Monsters doing the same thing to people. He uses bodies, souls, and memories as pieces inside a plan that only he understands. The physical game revealed how efficient that theft could be. Taking the opponent's strongest monster for 1 turn could remove a path-blocking threat and provide enough damage to finish the duel. If victory did not arrive, the monster could be tributed, so it never returned. The phrase, "until the end phase," sounded like mercy. The player using Change of Heart had several hours of card design history available to make sure that promise meant nothing. Harpy's Feather Duster gave Mai a cleaner form of control. It destroys every spell and trap the opponent controls. 1 activation can remove an entire defensive setup. Face-down cards that had created hesitation disappear together, allowing the Harpies to attack without walking into the surprises waiting behind the monsters. The card suits Mai because her early dueling identity depends on controlling what the opponent thinks they know. Her perfume strategy allows her to identify cards without looking at them. Her confidence makes opponents feel that she has already seen their plan. Harpy's Feather Duster extends that attitude to the field. The opponent's hidden protection receives 1 strong gust of wind and stops being relevant. Raigeki performs the matching job against monsters by destroying every monster the opponent controls. Darkhold destroys all monsters on the field. These mass removal spells taught players to fear overcommitting. A full field looks powerful because it represents several successful turns. Each summon adds damage, defense, and pressure. Board-clearing spells convert that investment into vulnerability. 1 card can answer several, leaving the opponent with fewer resources and no field. The anime loved large monsters, so it used removal carefully. A duel built around summoning an Egyptian god would become a short experience if the next player casually activated a one-card answer and moved on with the afternoon. Storytelling gave major monsters protection, special rules, or convenient counters. The physical game had to confront the efficiency directly through restrictions and changing card pools. These clearing spells matter because they created caution. The opponent could have Mirror Force set, though that is a trap card and belongs to another discussion. They could also hold Raigeki, Dark Hole, or Harpy's Feather Duster. A strong player had to consider how much of the hand should be committed when one draw might erase the entire position. Multiply represents the strange creativity of early duel monsters. Yugi uses it with Kuriboh to create an expanding wall of Kuriboh copies. Against Kaiba's Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, the little monsters keep multiplying as they are destroyed, preventing the enormous dragon from reaching Yugi. The physical card has specific restrictions. The anime treats the interaction like a magical property being discovered in the moment. Kuriboh has low attack, which normally makes it insignificant. Multiply transforms that weakness into the exact quality that allows the card to work. This became one of the early series' favorite ideas. A weak monster could possess an unusual feature that mattered more than attack points. Yugi survived because he understood the identity of the card he played. Kuriboh was small enough to multiply beyond Kaiba's ability to clear it. The scene also captures why Duelist Kingdom remains memorable despite its flexible relationship with rules. Cards interacted through images, environments, and implied physics. A moon could affect the ocean, a machine could attack while hidden beneath the water, a decaying mammoth could infect a dragon, Multiply could turn Kuriboh into a living shield. Later, Yu-Gi-Oh! Placed more of that imagination inside exact card text. Multiply belongs to the earlier version, where the duel sometimes felt like two people arguing about how magic ought to work, and the holograms accepted whichever explanation sounded more convincing. Card of Sanctity may be the clearest example of a spell designed for the needs of the anime. Its television effect allows both players to draw until they have 6 cards in their hands. The symmetry makes the card appear fair. Both duelists receive cards. The size of the benefit depends on how few cards each player held before the activation. A character could spend almost the entire hand on summons and combinations, activate Card of Sanctity, and return to 6 cards. The opponent might already hold 4 or 5 cards and receive very little. One player recovers the resources used to create a field, while the other receives a polite consolation draw. For the writers, the card is perfect. A long duel reaches a point where both characters are running out of options. Card of Sanctity supplies several new options at once. The duel can change direction, old strategies can return, and the characters can continue finding answers without the script, pretending that a single top deck contains 6 different effects. The printed card bears the scars of being translated into reality. Its physical effect requires the player to banish all other cards from their hand and field, with at least 1 from each, and draw until they have 2 cards. The anime fills a hand to 6. The physical version destroys almost everything the player owns for the privilege of reaching 2. That difference tells us how dangerous the television effect would have been. Real players would empty their hands as efficiently as possible, gain the full refill, and design entire decks around repeating the advantage. The anime could decide when the card appeared. Competitive players would try to see it in every opening hand. Card of Sanctity exposes the relationship between the show and the game. The show wants possibility. The game needs cost. The show can give both players 6 cards and trust the episode to create an exciting exchange. The game has to assume that one of those players has spent the previous week discovering how to prevent the other person from taking a turn. Every important spell card in Duel Monsters controls a different part of the experience. Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity control access to the deck. Monster Reborn controls access to the graveyard. Polymerization and ritual spells control the arrival of special monsters. Swords of Revealing Light controls time. Change of Heart controls ownership. Harpy's Feather Duster and Raigeki control how much of a field can survive 1 card. Toon World and the Seal of Orichalcos control the rules of an entire environment. Multiply controls the series' willingness to turn card artwork into logic. Card of Sanctity controls how long the story can keep producing answers. Gold Sarcophagus finally controls what must stay buried. This is why the spell cards deserve more attention. Duel Monsters marketed itself through creatures, and that was the correct decision. A box with blue eyes on the front will probably sell better than one featuring a suspicious green jar. Inside the duel, the monsters often depend on spells to become meaningful. Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon needs polymerization. Relinquish needs Black Illusion Ritual. The Toons need Toon World. The Orichalcos monsters need the Seal. A destroyed god needs Monster Reborn. A desperate Yugi needs Swords of Revealing Light to reach another turn. Even the strongest creature may only be waiting for change of heart to move it across the field. The monsters tell us who the duelists are. The spells tell us how they think. Kaiba uses power to combine dragons and overwhelm the field. Pegasus builds a private world whose rules favor him. Bakura steals control. Mai clears away hidden resistance. Adam repeatedly turns old cards and fallen monsters into new possibilities. Yugi wins the final duel by sealing away the resurrection card he knows Adam will trust. The most important spell cards also map the growth of Yu-Gi-Oh! Itself. Duelist Kingdom uses cards such as Multiply and Polymerization through imaginative, unstable logic. Battle City gives the graveyard, card advantage, and removal greater structure. Waking the Dragons turns a field spell into the moral center of an entire season. The Ceremonial Duel takes one of the oldest comeback cards and makes refusing its effect the final act of maturity. If the question is which spell was the strongest, Pot of Greed has the cleanest argument because it gives nearly every deck more resources without demanding anything meaningful. Graceful Charity becomes even more frightening once the graveyard is useful. The anime version of Card of Sanctity produces the largest refill. The Seal of Orichalcos carries powers and consequences that barely belong to an ordinary card game. Importance creates a different winner. Polymerization may be the most important to the growth of the franchise, because fusion became a permanent part of Yu-Gi-Oh's identity. Toon World may be the best expression of one character through a spell. The Seal of Orichalcos carries an entire story arc. Pot of Greed became the clearest lesson in card advantage. Monster Reborn sits at the center of everything Duel Monsters wanted cards to mean. It is powerful in a way a child can understand immediately. The best monster has been destroyed, and now it comes back. It creates hope, theft, surprise, and fear with the same effect. It connects the field to the graveyard and allows every monster that has already appeared to remain part of the duel. The series uses it for gods, dragons, magicians, and desperate final attacks. Its power grows from the history of the duel because every fallen monster becomes another possible target. Near the end, the story places that history inside Yugi and Atom's farewell. Yugi wins by stopping Monster Reborn. The spell that spent the series bringing everything back finally meets the one moment that requires a goodbye. Atom's god stays in the graveyard. The Pharaoh accepts defeat. Yugi stands on his own. Blue Eyes, Dark Magician, and the Egyptian gods remain the images people place on posters, boxes, and thumbnails. They earned that place. The quiet green cards underneath them carried the story from one image to the next.